What's a red herring? Well, it's very simple. A red herring is a distraction from the solution to your mystery novel. It may be a full alternate theory as to who committed the crime, or it may be just a little bit of weirdness that your sleuth has to puzzle out. Either way, we're going to learn all about how to tackle them today. We are going to talk about 2 ways to set up red herrings and about 4 ways to pay them off. That is, to bring them to a conclusion that satisfies the reader intellectually or emotionally. We're also going to answer the question, what is a suspect subplot? Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jane, and today I'm going to start off by talking about the difference between a red herring and a storyline clue. Okay, with a storyline clue, that is one that leads to unmasking the true killer, well, we sometimes want to fly a little bit under the reader's radar. We want to tuck it among some other information so that we can play fair by giving the reader the clue, but still manage to surprise them at the end of the book. With a red herring, however, we are usually looking to get the reader's attention. We're trying to say, hey, there's a clue here, so that we can lead the reader on a merry chase that will end in a big dead end. So let's talk about the 2 kinds of details that we can include in our stories that really get the reader's attention, and those are the odd and the synergistic. Odd details are just that, odd, strange, weird, unusual pieces of information that our reader picks up while reading our book. So let's say that one of your suspects corners our sleuth and tells her a long, brutal story about something that happened to her in her youth. Well, that's odd, and it makes the reader begin to spin up theories. It makes us say, maybe she was trying to threaten the sleuth. Maybe she was trying to warn the sleuth about an imminent danger. Another example comes from a book I read not too long ago in which a character described her son as being the product of a surprise adoption. Well, this seemed odd to me. I think surprise adoptions can happen, but they're far from the norm. Typically, adoptions have been pursued very diligently by the adoptive parents, and since I was reading a mystery, I picked up that nice, odd detail and immediately began spinning up maybes with it. Maybe she knew a child who was suddenly bereaved. Maybe a child was abandoned on her doorstep. Or maybe she killed the child's birth parents so that she could take him. Synergistic details are details that draw a connection between 2 or more things. So let's say we've got a character who used to be a plastic surgeon and another character who was once badly burned in a fire and had to have reconstructive surgery. Well, these 2 characters don't seem to know each other, but there is some obvious synergy between them because reconstructive surgery often does involve a plastic surgeon. So this is enough to make us start saying maybe they knew each other all along. Another example would be a victim who is a known philanderer and a character who seems to be hiding a pregnancy, even from her husband. There's synergy there. It's enough for us to think maybe they had an affair. And another example comes from the movie Clue. 6 strangers have been invited to a spooky house and are told that they are each being blackmailed by the same person. However, they quickly learn that they have something else in common. Each of them either makes their money from the government or from some project related to government security. Throughout the movie, various characters suggest that rather than simple blackmail, there must be a political motive behind their predicament. The synergy of their jobs is just too high for them to ignore it. Red herrings can lead us off in any direction. They can make us wonder about a particular motive, as in the example I just mentioned from Clue. They can cause us to investigate a particular location or dig deep into local history or any number of things. But sooner or later, most of the time, they will involve us zeroing in on a particular suspect. So in my last video, I talked about how one useful way to think of your suspects is think of them as subplots. The subplot begins when we notice something odd about the character, something that makes us start saying maybe. And it ends when we have resolved our questions about them. So let's look at an example from Gosford Park. In this movie, Ryan Phillippe arrives at a country estate as a valet, that is, a personal servant, to an American movie director. But immediately he's making everyone suspicious. Several of the servants claim that his Scottish accent doesn't sound Scottish at all. He asks weird questions at dinner, and we see this scene where he's alone with his employer and his behavior is anything but subservient. And so we start saying, maybe he's not really Scottish. Maybe he's not really a servant. Maybe he's here with an ulterior motive. Okay, and all of these things are going to turn out to be correct. It turns out that he's an American actor who is going to play a servant in an upcoming movie, and he's come here with his director to observe the behavior of the servants and prepare for his role. Once we learn this and we have a full, satisfying explanation for all the weird little details we encountered, well then, the subplot is over and that red herring is resolved, or as I like to say, paid off. Okay, jokes are said to have a setup and a payoff, and I think the same is true of red herrings. The odd or synergistic details are the setup, and the payoff is when we learn the explanation behind them. Now, we know what the payoff for a joke needs to look like in order to be satisfying. It's got to be funny. But what about the payoff for a red herring? What does that need to look like to satisfy the reader? Well, to me, it needs to be either surprising or emotionally satisfying. Thumbs up if you're liking this video so far, and then let's talk about ways we can pay off our red herrings. The first way to pay off a red herring is to reveal a secret that isn't the actual murder. Okay, this is the ending of our suspect subplot from Gosford Park. These can be very convoluted subplots as the suspect keeps trying to keep the sleuth from figuring out his secret. And they can often make the suspect look very guilty because frequently suspects will begin lying to keep their secrets. Perhaps a suspect will give a false alibi for the time of the murder because she was actually engaged in a romantic affair at the time of the crime. Or maybe the character has been doing everything she can to prevent the sleuth from examining the room where the victim died. At the end of her subplot, we will learn that she was using that room for counterfeiting art, and she was afraid of the evidence being found. So it's not great, but it doesn't make her the killer. Our suspect's secret could even be that she tried to kill the victim, but when she got there, he was already dead. The suspect's secret doesn't have to be truly criminal for this kind of subplot to work. It just has to be something the suspect doesn't want to admit to. I remember reading one mystery where the village priest's dark secret was that he and his wife were secret nudists who like to walk around naked in their off hours. It's not that bad, but he doesn't want it splashed around. Another way that suspect subplots are tied off is through an emotional appeal. The sleuth speaks with the suspect, hears his side of the story, and is convinced that he couldn't have done it. Frequently in these scenes, the suspect will express love for the victim in a way that's convincing or otherwise demonstrate that he simply had no desire to kill the victim. In an episode of Remington Steele called Altered Steel, we're trying to figure out which one of a polygamist's 5 wives tried to kill him. We pay off one of the suspect subplots with this woman, who explains that even though she now knows her husband was 5-timing her, she has been changed by their love and remains grateful for it.
When I first met Frank, I was an ambitious dress designer. I had no time for anything but running my own business. Frank showed me how hollow that life was. Without someone to share it with, my success meant nothing.
I'm aware, in a real police investigation, this would not constitute evidence, but in a cozy, this is a legitimate way to eliminate a suspect and bring their subplot to an end. Now, like the lady in this scene, your false suspect has to be somewhat eloquent to clear herself. Simply protesting her love for the victim is not enough. However, coming up with a unique story or observation about her love generally is. What we are looking for is not hard evidence of her innocence. We're looking for a story that adds up, answers all the questions posed by that suspect subplot, and makes us feel that we have gained in understanding. Sometimes the emotional resolution at the end of a suspect subplot like this will involve the suspect starting a new chapter in her life, ending a bad marriage, starting a new career she's always wanted, deciding she can no longer define herself by her family's approval. You can tell some lovely little stories about your suspects while also explaining what they've done during the book and why they're not the killer. A third and rather grim way to end a suspect subplot is by killing the suspect. Okay, frequently we want to drop a second or even a third or fourth body in a cozy, and being dead is a definite reason for one's suspect subplot to be over. These can be delightfully surprising ways to end suspect subplots because they often give us new information about the killer's intentions and send us rocketing off on new avenues of investigation. And a fourth way that you can tie off a suspect subplot is by clearing the suspect through evidence. Okay, back in that same episode of Remington Steele, the sleuths learned that each of the wives had the same charm bracelet and that the guilty party lost hers at the crime scene. This lady has the bracelet, so she's in the clear. Suspect subplot resolved. Eliminating a suspect through evidence is the simplest, quickest way to end a suspect subplot, and to my mind, it doesn't really give you that satisfying payoff we're talking about. That being said, I am okay with using it once or twice in a book. Not every suspect has got to have that sweet, sweet payoff. It may be useful to have 1 or 2 subplots tie off quickly and easily to let our readers focus on 2 or 3 major subplots that are going to get those big endings. But this character actually does have a surprise ending to her subplot. She is the killer. She realized that having that missing charm bracelet would be a big clue, and she ran out and bought herself a replacement. So this brings us to the last way to end a suspect subplot or red herring in a way that is really surprising and satisfying. We learn that all of the odd or synergistic details that we have noticed in this subplot are due to the machinations of the killer. He has lied or distorted evidence in a way to trick us down the wrong path. These can be really fun subplots. Sometimes there's nothing better than realizing that your sleuth has been hoodwinked and has to start again at the beginning. In my next video, I'm going to talk about major plot twists for your mystery. We're going to talk about how to brainstorm great twists that are going to throw your reader for a loop, and we're going to talk about how to do it simply and systematically so that you're not racking your brain throughout the plotting process. If you don't want to miss that, subscribe right here. Thanks for watching.